G'day guys, today I'm tuning 86s. We've got 3 FT86s here, all with superchargers on them. There's 2 Harrop kits and a Sprintex kit, so we're going to have a close look at each car and then we're going to get them on the dyno, give them a tune, and we'll come back to you at the end of the video with a comparison between them all and show you the differences between the different kits. Here we've got a Harrop kit on a 2013 FT86. Now this is a car I've tuned before. It's come into us with an issue around some air leaks, and we've discovered that there's some cleaner on the inlet manifold gaskets, has eroded the gaskets, causing them to leak, giving us an air leak. So we've repaired those gaskets and now we're going to put it back on the dyno and tune it again. This is a kit with an 80mm pulley. Standard Harrop kit is a 90mm pulley. We've dropped down a size here to get a bit more out of it. It's got a catback exhaust on it. I've got a tune file for this already, but I'm going to update it with the latest race ROM feature files to get the best results. Next we have a 2015 FT86, another Harrop kit. This is a brand new install from last week. Customer has optioned a 85mm pulley, so there'll be a fairly good gain in power from the driver's perspective. Now this car has got a few extra mods on it. It's got a headers back exhaust system, and we've added the bigger injectors, fuel pump and map sensor to go with it. Lastly, we've got this 2015 FT86 running a Sprintex kit with a 75mm pulley. The only other mod to this car is a catback exhaust. Focus here is getting it licensed in WA. So we're going to write a tune for it, and then we're going to get the car 5 gas tested so it can be engineered, so it can be licensed in WA. So the first car I'm going to tune is the Sprintex car. It's running a 75mm pulley, as I mentioned earlier, and it's something I've done a lot of in the past. I did the very first tune for the very first Sprintex prototype back in 2013, and I've also been using the ECU Tech software platform for this car since its inception in 2013, 12 years ago. So I'm well versed in the software, I've done loads of these. I will have a tune file that's relatively close, so I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to build from there to suit the mods. So, first step, get on the dyno. That was easy. Alright, let's get stuck in. Alright, first things first, plug in with ECU Tech software, make sure it's got a license, and it hasn't. So it's an open source tune. Now I've got open source software, so I've had a look at the tune, and it's not good. I'll show you the ignition timing table here. As you can see, there's a large step in the numbers. Now this is the hallmark of bad tuning. There's absolutely no way that that's the right shape for the timing table, so I'm not going to run this car to give a before and after. I like to do that often just to show gains, but in this case I'm not confident with the tune, so I'm not going to do it. One of the considerations with this type of car is the AVCS cam timing system. Now there are a few cars out there that have an issue with the cam timing going offline once they've been reflashed, and the only way to fix it is to drive around the block and resync all the wheel speeds and they'll come back on. ECU Tech have fixed that by adding a selection of tables to enable that to be toggled on and off. It's not in all the ROM IDs, so it's really important to make sure that you're not dealing with a ROM ID that doesn't have the switches in it, because if that's the case, it needs to be flashed with live tuner, driven around the block, and then put on the dyno and tuned in live tuner mode only. That's the only way you can get around it. Luckily, in this case, the ROM ID that's in the car is supported with ECU Tech with the switches to toggle the cam timing stuff if there's a problem. So let's see how we go with that. Now, as I said earlier, I've done absolutely heaps of these. I did the very first Sprintex Supercharged kit anywhere in the world back in 2013 when they first developed the prototype. We tuned it for them. I've spent thousands of hours tuning FT86s in different forms over the years, naturally aspirated, turbo kits of numerous kinds, superchargers and flex fuel setups and all sorts. So I'm very familiar with the software. I've also got the open source stuff. I don't like the open source stuff for this model simply because there isn't a particularly well-defined ROM ID for every single ROM ID that's out there. So there's a lot of different ROM IDs these things run. Some of the open source stuff is defined all right, you can use it. Some of it isn't. So ECU Tech is definitely the right tool for this job. So I've started with something that I know is fairly close. I've got a huge library of tunes I've done before. This is a 75mm pulley. I've got tunes for 75mm pulleys, 70mm or 69mm pulleys, 60mm pulleys. I've got something that's fairly close to the mark. I'm going to start with that. I've taken the original race ROM feature file off it, updated it with the latest live tuning race ROM feature file for the car. That's going to give me much better logging, much better special features, and most importantly, it's going to give me the live tuning feature. So this is my view from the driver's seat. I've got my tuning desk set up in front of me. This just suction cup on the windscreen gives me a nice clear view of the laptop. I've got my software open. I've got a couple of maps being live tuned here. There's some data logging going on over here. And outside there is my dyno screen, which is where I'm looking at all the power and torque numbers. Also see I have a small mirror there so I can keep an eye on the car while it's running to make sure that there's no leaks, anything under the engine bay that might be a problem, and of course check for any fires. Any good tuner will tell you that one of the biggest risks on a dyno is a fire, and so we have got to keep a very close eye on the cars to make sure that there's nothing burning. They get very, very hot, especially the turbo cars. We want to make sure that if anything's going on, we catch it early. So even though the 8.6 comes out of the factory as an NA or naturally aspirated car, there are a huge number of tables in the ECU that are adjustable to accommodate the factory tuning. The ECU Tech Race ROM feature file only adds to that, and so I've gone through and checked every single table that I like to modify in the factory side of the tune, and then gone through and made sure all of the Race ROM extra tables are also scaled correctly and got the correct data in them for the different modes that you can run the car in. That's mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, mode 4, which is adjustable from the cruise control switch on the fly, and so we need to make sure that anytime those modes get switched, all the correct data is in the tables. Together with all the wide open throttle power maps that I've adjusted to the power that I want, I've also gone through and changed a whole host of background stuff. For example, the startup process on the 8.6, very, very rough, extremely noisy. I've dialed that back a little bit to try and make it a bit nicer on the startup, changed a whole bunch of MAF idle targeting tables to accommodate that, after starting ignition timing tables. There's absolutely heaps. There's no point in going through every single table over here all day, but it's sophisticated. There's a lot in there. I've got a lot going on with adjustments, and I've got the result that I want, which is 170 kilowatts and 260 Newton meters of torque, which is up from 120 kilowatts as standard. Even though this car has a more or less standard exhaust system, apart from the catback, there is plenty that needs adjusting to get the numbers that we want. And it's interesting to note that you can actually get almost 60 kilowatt gain without really changing the exhaust pipe. Now, one of the things about supercharger tuning that is completely different to turbo tuning is that the superchargers, screw type superchargers, which are Harrop and Sprintex, they are what's known as positive displacement pumps. So for every turn of the pump, you're going to get X amount of air coming out, whether it's 2 litres, 2.5 litres, or whatever it is. And no matter what, it's going in the engine. It can't go out anywhere else. It has to go in the engine. So what we find is, in contrast to a turbo car, that you run more boost in the manifold, you get more power. Actually, with the supercharger stuff, you've got to flip that on its head. Less boost in the manifold or pressure in the manifold relates to more power, because less of it's staying in the manifold and more of it's going in the engine. Alright, so I'm done on the dyno with this one. Next step is going to be on the road for a road test, make sure she's good. After that, good to hand back to the customer. So let's get it off the dyno. I'm getting good at that. Alright, let's go. Alright, so that's the road test done. I'm happy with the way it drives, so I think we can call this one done. On to the next one, the Harrop kits. So next up is the first of the Harrop cars. Now this is a little bit different to the Sprintex kit I just did. So slightly larger supercharger, completely different layout under the bonnet. The car has been delivered to us with a headers back exhaust system. Obviously we've added the Harrop kit, the larger injectors, larger fuel pump, and larger map sensor. So let's get it on the dyno. All right, we're all bolted up, so let's get started. All right, so as I would have mentioned, I've done absolutely heaps of these. I've got a big library of tunes that I can draw on for a starting point. So I've selected the one that's probably fairly close, and I'm going to go through and check all the settings, make sure that they're all exactly where I want them before I get started. Then it's the latest version of ECU Tech Race ROM, Live Tuner. Flash that in, and that'll be a good place to start. So a key difference with this car compared to the Sprintex car is this car has larger port injectors. We've selected some a little bit bigger than standard, extended tip, the same as the original ones. And the key thing about the big injectors is getting them scaled correctly. Now, it's always necessary to scale injectors correctly, but on an 8.6 with 4 port injectors and 4 direct injectors, it's even more critical. And the reason for that is that the car will start on one set of injectors, often the port set, and then move over to running on the direct set. So if the car has built up a large fuel trim running on the port injectors because they're not scaled correctly, and it transitions over to the direct injectors, there's going to be a point where the ECU is going to have to dial out that fuel trim and start running a new fuel trim for the direct injectors. That's going to make the car hesitate and stumble as it transitions and rebuilds the fuel trim. So you really want to be having minimal fuel trim on the port injectors while it's idling, so it transitions over to the direct injectors, which will also have minimal trim as long as the MAF scaler's set up correctly, and you won't have that stumble. It's easy to get it wrong. I've seen loads of cars come through with the problem. I fixed it a huge number of times. I know what it is. That just comes with experience of tuning this platform. One of the other key considerations about tuning a car that's running direct injection is the fact that you cannot keep putting the fuel in the same way you would a port injector. With a port injector, you can pretty much put the fuel in as much as you like, whenever you like. It can run almost continuously. With a direct injector, that's totally different. You can't keep injecting fuel as you're trying to burn that fuel. So there's a very specific limit to how much fuel you can put in, which angles of the crank you can use to inject that fuel, and make sure that you stop injecting that fuel close to the spark event. Get it too close to the spark event and the fuel injection starts interfering with the spark event, and you can have problems from there. Now, these cars don't like running on the port injectors full time. I've tested that. It definitely costs power and is nowhere near as efficient as direct injection. One of the reasons that they produced direct injection was that you can get much more efficient burn, and the engines will run more timing. You can get more power out of them with the same exact setup, but direct injector, not port injector. Now, one of the reasons for that is that the charge temperature, which is the temperature of the mixture in the cylinder, is much cooler with direct injection. Now, it's the same amount of fuel getting injected into the same amount of air, but the difference is that with a port injector, you're spraying it in the port, and what it basically does is the fuel will cool down the port, and so when it comes into the chamber, it is warmer than it would be if it was directed straight into the air in the chamber. So you're running cooler charge temps with a direct injector engine, which gives you more ability to add more timing. That's going to give you more power. All right, so I'm starting to get towards the back end of the job now. I have got the fueling exactly where I want it. I've got my ignition tables exactly where I want them. I've got all the AVCS stuff exactly where I want it. I've got no knock counts going on. My fuel targetings are perfect. So now I'm just going to start copying over the tables into the different modes. ECU Tech Race ROM gives 4 different modes. Those tables need to be populated once you've written them. Power-wise, we're sitting on 210 kilowatts, and that's compared to 120 kilowatts at the hubs from a naturally aspirated car. So you can see 90 kilowatt gain from this kit, and really it's just bolt-on components. The engine's still completely stock inside. Excellent gains. This car's going to drive real nice on the road. I've just got to finish off the mapping, get on the road, dial in the special features, make sure it drives nice, and then should be good to go, and it's on to the next one. All right, so I'm happy with the dyno runs. Everything's set up the way I want it. Next step is off the dyno, onto the road. That's that, so let's go. All right, so we're going to go out on the road and calibrate the Race ROM special features. Now they are auto blip on down change, flat foot shifting, launch control, and the burble. So I've got them set up on 3 different maps. This model allows us to switch the maps on the fly. I've got 3 maps on the go. First map, map 1, is going to be normal driving. The second map, map 2, is going to be auto blip, launch control, flat foot shifting. And the third map, map 3, is all of those plus the burble. So I'll just show you how they work. We've got our cruise control button here. So long hold up, and then select the maps up and down. All right, so on the tacho, that looks like this. So that's map 1, map 2, map 3, map 2, map 1. We're going to start in map 1, make sure it drives nice. All right guys, first thing I'm going to show you is the burble. So it's on the gas and lift. Next thing I'm going to show you is the auto blip. So that's basically on the brakes and then on the clutch to get the auto blip to work. There you have it. And last I'm going to show you the flat foot shifting. As the name suggests, don't lift to change. Let's not forget the launch control. So launch control is pretty easy. Stationary, handbrake off, clutch in, first gear, and just plant it like this. Pretty easy. You can also change the speed at which it holds by using the cruise control lever. Up and down will raise or lower that launch control limit by 250 RPM per increment. All right, that's the road test done. All the special features are set up. The dyno work's finished, paragraphs printed. I'm happy with it. It's good to go. Let's get on with the next one. All right, so this is the last car in our 8.6 supercharger lineup. It's another Harrop kit. It's running an 80mm pulley, and it's a kit we installed 5 years ago for the original owner of the car. Now, since then, the car's changed hands a couple of times, and the new owner has brought it into us because it has a little bit of a running issue. Now, his mechanic had told him that he thought it was a tuning issue. Now, we know that's not the case. The car ran fine when it left here 5 years ago, and the tune is something that never ever wears out. So we've put it through the workshop and had a look to see if we can find out what's going on, and we quickly identified that there was an air leak between the supercharger manifold and the heads. Now, what we think has happened is the seals have been compromised by some kind of detergent or cleaner. The seals are small rubber inserts in the bottom of the manifold. They are exposed to the air on all 4 corners, and those 4 corners have been eroded by some kind of chemical component. That's allowed the seal to become compromised and providing a huge extra air source for the engine, an air leak, giving us massive fuel trims and a car that runs like, well. We've taken the manifold off, replaced the seals, now it's back in the dyno. Being a car that I've tuned before, obviously I have a tune file for this car. I'm not going to use it though. I've changed the way I do these a little bit over the years, and so I'm going to clean sheet it with a brand new Race ROM feature file, the most up-to-date version, and go from there. So next step, get it on the dyno. I'm getting good at that. So as I mentioned earlier, the tune in your car is pretty much one of the only bits that never wears out. It's exactly the same program when I ride it as it is 10, 20, 30 years later. So why put it back on the dyno? Well, the reason for that is because the engine is a mechanical item and it will wear out. So there are components in the engine that will wear over time, and the requirements of the tune may be different as the engine starts to wear. So there's obviously cars out there that run the factory tune for the whole entire lives, don't need to be retuned, and that's because those tunes are extremely conservative. There's plenty of margin in them, they run incredibly rich on wide open throttle, they've got hardly any ignition timing in them, and they're not really working that hard. Those tunes are perfect for standard cars for the whole life. When you've got a modified car and you've tuned it, we've exploited those margins to get you your gains, and so the tune is dialed into your car much more closely than a factory tune ever would be. So we recommend bringing the cars in for a retune or checkup every 5 years or 50,000 kilometers, whichever comes first, just to make sure that your tune that's written for your car is still absolutely perfect for it. So same engine as last car, same supercharger kit as last car, slightly smaller pulley, but more or less the same. It's all about the big injector scaling, making sure there's no wild fuel trims for the ECU to correct as it flips from port to direct injectors and back again. Also, this car is running a completely different ROM ID to the last car. This is a slightly earlier car, slightly earlier ROM ID. Small differences throughout the software that you need to be aware of. No massive changes, but as always, the devil's in the detail. So one of the advantages of doing back-to-back-to-back tunes on a similar platform is just familiarity with the software. There's a lot going on in the software, it's very detailed. The more you can tune yourself in to the nitty-gritty of the software, the better outcome is going to be for the tune. Alright, so I'm starting to get there quite quickly with this car. As I mentioned, being tuned into the software is definitely an advantage. Every time I've got multiple cars of the same type and the same software platform to do, I like to do them back to back to back. Just makes the job a little tiny bit easier on the brain because you're very focused on the software, it's front of mind, and you get the better result a little bit quicker than you would do otherwise. Alright, almost done here. Power numbers coming up about 190 kilowatts and 300 newton meters of torque. And that's a little bit less than the last Harrop car I just did. Reason being that this car only has a catback exhaust, whereas the other car had headers, front pipe and catback. So the complete exhaust system front to rear. So that's definitely making a difference in how much timing I can get into it and how much power it's going to make. Alright, so that's it for the dyno. So let's get it out on the road. I've got the race run features set up exactly the same as the last car. There's 3 maps set up so you can toggle them on the cruise control stalk. So I'm not going to get into that again, but that pretty much rounds the car out. That's all 3 cars tuned. I'm happy with all of them. She's good to go. Alright guys, so there you have it. 3 cars, 3 superchargers and 3 tunes. If you want to know a bit more about how we can improve the power of your 8.6 or BRZ, get in touch by clicking the link below. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.